All right, buckle up, everybody, because today we are diving into some pretty out there territory.
Oh, I like the sound of that. Always up for an adventure.
You and me both. So, today's deep dive is centered around a YouTube video, and, well, it features a guided hypnosis session.
Okay, hypnosis. I'm intrigued already.
Yeah, I know. It sounds a little woo woo, but what makes this one particularly interesting is that it's all about, Metatron.
Metatron, now that's a name that carries some serious weight. Depending on where you look, he's been described as an angel, a scribe, even a mediator between the divine and humanity. A pretty mysterious figure all around.
Exactly. And this hypnosis session, they're trying to tap directly into Metatron's energy. The participant, Elena, she's guided to connect with that energy and share what she sees.
And what does she see? Anything particularly noteworthy?
Well, that's where things get interesting. See, her visions, they don't exactly match up with the traditional, angelic imagery you might expect.
Oh, how so?
For starters, she describes this Merkaba emblem.
Ah, the Merkaba. We'll have to unpack that one later. It's a whole rabbit hole in itself.
Right, and along with that, there are all these intense fluctuations of light and color. Sounds pretty mystical, right?
Yeah, pretty standard mystical fare so far.
Okay, but then, get this, she describes Metatron as a hybrid humanoid with Nephilim characteristics.
Now hold on, Nephilim characteristics. That's a curveball I wasn't expecting.
I know, right? It definitely throws a wrench into the whole benevolent angel image.
It definitely makes you wonder if we're dealing with a benevolent angel or something. Well, a bit more sinister. Who are the Nephilim again, for those who might not remember?
Right, good point. So, in Liturgical and other ancient traditions, they're often depicted as these powerful beings, sometimes giants, born from the union of angels and humans, not exactly your typical angelic beings.
Definitely not. So we've got this figure, Metatron, shrouded in mystery. According to the Talmud, he's an angelic prince, often associated with the Tree of Knowledge.
But then we have Elena's vision, which kind of throws a wrench in the works. So who is Metatron, really?
A very good question. And to add another layer to this puzzle, Elena also shares some intriguing insights into Metatron's role and influence.
Oh, like what?
Well, she describes his purpose as creating a sense of dependence in humans.
Dependence. Hold on. How does that work? Making humans dependent.
She suggests that Metatron does this by making humans constantly feel the need for something supreme, something outside of themselves. Like this idea is implanted in our minds that we're somehow inferior, that we need some external force to guide us.
That's a pretty unsettling thought. It makes you think about how that need for something supreme, how it could be exploited, right, to control people, manipulate them.
It is unsettling. And it reminds me of those ancient alien theories where humans are portrayed as being controlled by these advanced beings, with technology and...
Oh, yeah, I see what you mean. And Alina, she even describes seeing these strange devices emitting light, devices she believes were used to control and enslave humans in the past.
Right. And while we're not necessarily saying we believe in those ancient alien theories, it is interesting, isn't it, how these ideas, they play into our fascination with power dynamics, control mechanisms, and the use of technology for manipulation. It's a theme that runs throughout history, wouldn't you say?
Definitely. And it's not just ancient history either. Think about how information is controlled today, how algorithms shape what we see online, the spread of misinformation. It's like these patterns of control, they're woven into the fabric of society itself.
A very astute observation. And it raises some important questions about the systems we operate within, right? And who benefits from maintaining those power structures. But before we go too far down that rabbit hole, maybe we should take a closer look at this Merkaba concept that you mentioned earlier. It seems to play a pretty central role in Elena's vision.
Yeah, okay, let's unpack this Merkaba thing. I've got to admit, I'm not all that familiar with it. What exactly is it, and why does it seem so important in Elena's experience?
Well, according to Elena, the Merkaba is this symbol with 7 levels of ascension. It's connected to consciousness, to overcoming obstacles related to karma, and achieving, personal growth.
So it's like a roadmap for spiritual development.
In a way, yes. And what's interesting is how she connects the Merkaba to the chakras, those energy centers within the body.
Right, the chakras.
Exactly. She outlines these challenges individuals face at each level of the Merkaba, almost like stages in a video game.
Okay, I'm starting to get the picture. But is it really that straightforward? I mean, you just activate your Merkaba and bam, spiritual enlightenment?
Well, I think it's a little more complicated than that. While the idea of the Merkaba as a tool for ascension is intriguing, I think it's important to be cautious about relying solely on external symbols or practices for genuine spiritual growth.
So it's not just about meditating on a symbol and hoping for the best.
Exactly. True transformation, it requires inner work, self-awareness and a willingness to confront our own shadows, our limitations. It's not just about reaching a higher level, but understanding the journey itself, the lessons we learn along the way.
That makes a lot of sense. And this is where Elena's session takes another interesting turn. She starts to suggest that this whole Metatron Merkaba system, it might be more than meets the eye.
More than meets the eye. Go on.
She actually suggests that it could be, well, a carefully constructed illusion.
The constructed illusion. So instead of a benevolent angel guiding humanity toward enlightenment, we're presented with the possibility that Metatron is a tool for control, a representation of a fabricated reality designed to keep us, well, trapped.
Exactly. And it makes you wonder, who's setting this trap? Who's behind this grand illusion?
Well, Elena has some thoughts on that, and they might surprise you.
Let's hear it.
She points the finger at reptilian beings.
Reptilian beings. Wait, are we venturing into conspiracy theory territory now?
Perhaps, but regardless of whether we take it literally, the idea of these reptilian beings, it serves as a powerful metaphor, don't you think? For the forces that seek to control and manipulate us, whether those forces are individuals, institutions, or even the systems we create ourselves.
A metaphor, yeah, I can see that. So it's like a cosmic conspiracy theory, but one that holds a mirror up to our own anxieties about power, control, the forces that shape our reality.
Exactly, and it begs the question, who or what is pulling the strings? Are we really in control of our own destinies? Or are we, as Elena suggests, playing a game with rules we don't even understand?
Wow. Okay, that's a lot to unpack right there. It's like that scene in The Matrix, where Morpheus offers Neo the choice between the red pill and the blue pill.
Ah, yes, the truth, however unsettling or blissful ignorance.
Right, and that choice, that struggle between awareness and complacency, I mean, it's something we all face, isn't it? Whether we realize it or not.
Absolutely, and it's a choice with profound implications for how we navigate our lives, how we engage with the world around us.
Speaking of control or manipulation, Elena also makes this pretty bold claim about the shift from polytheism to monotheism.
Oh, that's a fascinating one. Tell me more.
She argues that it was a deliberate move to suppress human consciousness and establish a system of control.
That's definitely a claim that requires careful consideration. It's true that the transition to monotheism involved some pretty significant power shifts. And often, yeah, tactics like fear and violence were used to enforce conformity to the new belief system.
So you're saying this pattern of control and manipulation, it could extend far beyond the individual level, like into entire religious and cultural systems. That's a pretty heavy thought.
It is heavy, and it's important to acknowledge that the history of religion is complex, nuanced. While there's no denying that religion has been used as a tool for control throughout history, it's also been a source of inspiration, community, and moral guidance for billions of people across cultures and throughout time.
Right, so it's not about demonizing religion, but recognizing that potential for both good and bad, liberation and control. Like maybe that duality is inherent in any system of belief, any ideology that seeks to, I don't know, define our understanding of the world or fleece in it.
That's a profound insight. It speaks to the inherent complexity of human belief systems and the ways in which they can be both empowering and, well, potentially oppressive.
Okay, so we've got this mysterious Metatron figure, this potentially deceptive Merkaba system, and this overarching theme of control and manipulation that seems to run through history, religion, even modern technology. It's a lot to wrap our head around. Where does all of this leave us?
Well, I think that's a question we'll continue to explore as we delve deeper into Elena's session. Stay tuned, because things are about to get even more interesting. So before we went away there, we were talking about this idea that even seemingly spiritual practices, like Merkaba meditation, can be, well, potentially dangerous.
Yeah, that really stuck with me, that idea that connecting with Merkaba could actually lead to disconnection from, reality.
It might seem counterintuitive, I know, but think about it this way. Imagine getting so caught up in an online game, a virtual world, that you start neglecting your real life.
Okay, yeah, I see where you're going with this.
You're so focused on leveling up, completing quests, that you lose sight of your responsibilities, your relationships, the real world around you.
So you're saying getting too attached to Merkaba, relying on it as your only source of spiritual fulfillment, could actually hinder your growth in the real world.
That's a great way to put it. It's like becoming dependent on an external energy source, right? Instead of cultivating your own inner strength and wisdom, sure, you might experience these temporary feelings of euphoria or transcendence, but you risk losing touch with your own intuition.
So it's not about rejecting Merkaba entirely, but approaching it with caution, with a healthy dose of skepticism, remembering that real spiritual growth comes from within, not from some external symbol.
Exactly. It's about finding that balance between exploration and grounding, between expanding your consciousness and staying connected to the reality of, well, your everyday life.
Makes sense. But man, we've covered a lot of ground here. This mysterious Metatron, the potential pitfalls of Merkaba, this whole idea of control and manipulation running through everything. Honestly, it's a lot to wrap my head around.
It is a lot, but that's the nature of a deep dive, isn't it? We're going deep, exploring these complex ideas.
True, true. But I guess I'm wondering, what are we supposed to take away from all of this?
I think the most important takeaway is this. This deep dive, it's not about arriving at definitive answers. It's about prompting you to question, to explore, to look at the world, with fresh eyes.
So it's less about finding the answer and more about asking the right questions.
Precisely. And those questions, they can lead you down some fascinating paths. Take this whole exploration of Metatron, for example. On the surface, it might seem like a wild goose chase, but it's really a jumping-off point for a much deeper inquiry. An inquiry into the nature of power, of control, the forces that influence our lives.
I think I'm starting to see that. It's like this hypnosis session. It's less about literal truth and more about symbolism, metaphor, using these ancient figures, these mystical concepts to explore very real concerns about the human condition.
Exactly. It's a modern-day parable, a story that uses allegory and symbolism to convey deeper truths about ourselves and the world.
Like a cautionary tale wrapped in a cosmic conspiracy theory.
Yeah, I like that. And ultimately, it reminds us that the search for truth and meaning, it's an ongoing journey, one that requires constant vigilance, critical thinking, a healthy dose of skepticism.
So where do we go from here? What are we supposed to do with all this information?
Well, I think the first step is recognizing that we all have this potential, right, for both control and liberation within ourselves. We can choose to buy into the systems of control that surround us, or we can choose to question them, challenge them.
It's like that George Orwell quote, "In a time of universal deceit, telling the truth is a revolutionary act."
Exactly. And that truth, that inner freedom, it can't be found solely through external means. It's a process of self-discovery, of shedding those limiting beliefs, of connecting with our own innate wisdom, our power.
So instead of looking for answers outside of ourselves, maybe the real journey is inward.
That's a profound insight. And while this deep dive is focused on some pretty out there concepts, I think the real takeaway is the importance of self-awareness, critical thinking, and the courage to question the narratives that shape our reality.
Well said. It definitely gives me a lot to think about. You mentioned earlier that Elena had some warnings about Merkaba meditation. What other potential dangers did she talk about?
Oh yes, she actually made this fascinating comparison to online gaming. She suggested that becoming too reliant on Merkaba meditation can be like getting, well, trapped in a virtual world, disconnecting from real life.
That analogy, I think it really resonates with people today, especially with, social media, virtual reality. It's so easy to get caught up in the digital world and lose touch with, well, what's real.
It is, and it brings us to another crucial point, discernment. When engaging with any spiritual practice, any belief system, it's essential to approach it with a discerning mind. Question what resonates with you, what feels off. Trust your intuition.
So it's about taking responsibility for your own spiritual journey, not just blindly following some guru or a set of teachings.
Exactly. It's about recognizing that you are the ultimate authority when it comes to your own spiritual growth, your well-being. No one else can tell you what's true for you. You have to find that truth within yourself.
That's empowering, but it also sounds like a lot of work.
It is work, but it's the most rewarding work you'll ever do. The work of becoming fully awake, fully alive, and fully aligned with your true self.
Okay, so we've explored this mysterious Metatron, delved into the potential pitfalls of Merkaba meditation, and even touched upon this idea of a grand conspiracy to control humanity. But before we wrap up, I'm curious, what are your thoughts on something that Elena mentioned toward the end of her session?
I'm all ears. What stood out to you?
She talked about how the suppression of human consciousness, particularly through the shift to monotheism, created this void, this need for something to fill that spiritual gap. And that void, she argued, made it easier to control and manipulate people. It's a pretty provocative claim, wouldn't you say?
It is. It's a claim that's been debated by historians, philosophers, theologians for centuries. The relationship between religion, power, and the human psyche, it's complex.
Yeah, for sure. And I'm not even sure what I believe, to be honest. But it does make me wonder if that void exists, if there really is this inherent need for something supreme to guide us. What are the implications for our modern world?
Now, that's a fascinating question, and I don't think there's a simple answer. But exploring that question, examining our own beliefs and motivations, I think it's essential for navigating the complexities of our modern world.
So it's not about finding the answer, but about asking the right questions.
Exactly. And those questions, those personal inquiries, they can lead us down some fascinating, unexpected paths.
Feels like we're right back at the beginning of this deep dive, ready to explore a whole new world of possibilities.
That's the beauty of a curious mind. It's never satisfied with easy answers. It always seeks deeper understanding.
So, what's the one question you would want our listeners to ponder as they continue their own exploration? What's that lingering thought that might keep them up at night, in a good way?
Here's something to chew on. If our reality is shaped, at least in part, by the narratives we believe, who or what is shaping those narratives? And more importantly, do we have the power to rewrite them?
Ooh, that's a good one. It's like a choose your own adventure story. But instead of turning to page 37, we're turning inward to discover our own truth.
Precisely. And that, my friend, is where the real adventure begins.
I love it. That's a perfect way to wrap up this mind-bending deep dive. Thanks for joining me on this journey.
The pleasure was all mine. And to our listeners out there, keep exploring, keep questioning, and never stop seeking your own truth.
That was a really powerful thought to end on, that we have the power to rewrite those narratives that shape our reality. But before we get too carried away with that, I think there's one more element from Elena's session that we need to address. She makes some pretty startling claims about these reptilian beings, controlling humanity. It's a wild concept, to say the least. Do you think there's any truth to that, or is it just pure fantasy?
That's a great question, and I think it deserves a nuanced response. While there's no scientific evidence to support the literary existence of reptilian overlords, it's important to remember that this idea, this archetype, it's been present in human mythology and storytelling for centuries. Think about it. The serpent, the lizard, these creatures, they often symbolize deception, manipulation, hidden knowledge.
So you're saying that even if these reptilian beings don't actually exist, the concept itself, the archetype, it still holds a lot of power over our collective imagination.
Exactly. Archetypes, they tap into our deepest fears and desires. They often reflect these anxieties that we might not even be consciously aware of. Like with a reptilian archetype, it could be seen as a manifestation of our fear of the unknown. Those forces beyond our control, being manipulated by something we can't see or understand.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's like how the archetype of the hero inspires us to be brave, selfless, while the villain makes us wary of those who seem powerful, manipulative.
Precisely. And these archetypes, they're not just confined to ancient myths and legends. They're all over our modern culture. Think about how often you see reptilian imagery in movies, TV shows, even advertising. It often evokes this sense of danger, mystery, or even like a hidden agenda.
That's true. I never really thought about it that way before. But yeah, now that you mention it, I can definitely see how this archetype is still very much alive in our collective psyche.
It is, and I think that's what makes this whole reptilian conspiracy theory so fascinating. On the surface, it might seem like this far-fetched idea, but when you really dig into it, you start to see how it reflects these very real anxieties about power, control, and those forces that shape our world.
It's almost like a modern-day myth, a way of expressing those fears and anxieties about the complexities of the world, right?
I think that's a very astute observation. Myths, they serve a purpose. They help us grapple with these complex issues, find meaning in our lives, make sense of the world, even when it feels chaotic and unpredictable.
It's like how ancient cultures used myths to explain natural phenomena, right? Teach moral lessons or provide a sense of order in a world that often felt really overwhelming.
Exactly. And even today in our modern world, where science and technology have sort of demystified many aspects of our existence, we still crave those grand narratives, those explanations that go beyond, the purely rational.
So you're saying that even in a world dominated by facts and data, we still need stories, myths, archetypes to help us make sense of the human experience.
Absolutely. And that's why it's so important to be aware of the power of these narratives, to recognize how they shape our perceptions, to choose those stories that empower us, inspire us, and help us create a better world.
Wow, after this deep dive into Metatron, Merkaba, and these reptilian beings, I'm starting to see things in a whole new light. It's like I've been given this new lens to view the world through, one that reveals the hidden patterns, the underlying narratives, the forces that are often operating just beneath the surface.
That's the power of a deep dive like this. It's about expanding your awareness, challenging your assumptions, and ultimately empowering you to think for yourself.
And it's not about just blindly accepting or rejecting any particular belief system. It's about engaging with these ideas, critically sifting through the information, forming your own conclusions.
Exactly. It's about taking ownership of your own beliefs, your own understanding of the world, and recognizing that you have the power to choose those narratives that shape your reality.
Well, on that empowering note, I think it's time to wrap up this deep dive. We've covered a lot of ground here, from ancient angels to reptilian conspiracies, and along the way, I think we've uncovered some pretty profound insights about the nature of reality, the power of belief, and the importance of, critical thinking.
It has been a fascinating journey, and I hope our listeners out there found it as thought-provoking as we have. Remember, the exploration doesn't end here. Keep questioning, keep seeking, and most importantly, never stop believing in your own power to create a better world.
Well said. That's a perfect note to end on. Thanks for joining me on this journey. It's been an absolute pleasure.
The pleasure was all mine. And all our listeners, until next time, keep those minds open and keep exploring.